You need to have a beautiful heart in order to nurture a relationship. If you do not have that heart, relationships can be very difficult. There is a lot of confusion between taking the external problems into the inner world. But if you can clearly demarcate that problems are there, problems would come. What you need to do those problems is right action to resolve those problems. And consistent right actions is what is going to create your destiny.
Everybody treats spirituality as a retreat.
Spirituality is the answer for your dark moment. And you don't need to live this way. Karma can be external. It could also mean that there's state of consciousness getting passed on into the family. That is why you always see that there are repeating patterns in the family. Patterns of loss, patterns of failure, patterns of separation.
Why do you think we are here? Do you think we are here to solve a purpose? Do you think we are here to only experience life and to understand the conscious, subconscious and the one consciousness? Or do you think we are here to suffer?
We are here.
So Preeta ji, tell me in one sentence, what exactly is Ekam?
Ekam is the world center for enlightenment and awakening, where people step in, sit down to have experiences, something vaster than themselves.
And is Ekam about divine grace? Is it about exploring consciousness? Or is it creating neurological conditions for transcendence?
It is all three. It helps individuals move into powerful states of consciousness, powerful awakening in their being. They have a direct experience of the divine, the higher power. And when you are immersed in Ekam, there is a shift that happens in one's brain, in one's body, and also in one's consciousness. So I would say all three.
Amazing. Can you tell me, what does Ekam offer that, according to you, in the modern world, psychology, therapy, community or religion does not?
Each of this is very different. Religion is basically a set of codes, a particular religion, a particular ceremony, a particular ritual, a particular faith or belief. That is religion. And therapy is to kind of help you in whatever you're dealing with in your life, a support. Psychology is to do with the mind, but of late psychology has taken in a little of spirituality. I would say the modern psychology that we know today is very different from where it started, and it has tried to take in mostly the Hindu and the Buddhist philosophy. Spirituality is what we stand for. It is a deep dive into one's consciousness. In simplest terms would be to get rid of your stressful states, your suffering, to wake up to something more beautiful, vast in one's consciousness, to live in peace, to live free of division and separation, and to experience oneness. That is spirituality. So it can get colored with all these other things, but it stands very pure, and it has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with a faith or a particular belief, but it is a very powerful experience of the greater power. It is not a belief that has been passed on from one to the other. It is not a tradition that has been passed on, but emerges as a great experience. To begin with, every religion would have started with very powerful spiritual experiences.
Correct.
Which in turn has passed on from one generation to another and has become a set of codes. And here we are to kind of get back to those roots, to have those powerful experiences in consciousness where you can actually go beyond separation and experience vastness in one's consciousness.
When did you have your first experience?
Powerful experiences of enlightenment, powerful experiences of expanded states in consciousness. I would say it happened around when I was 17 years old. Experiences where there was no self, experiences of connecting with a vaster power in this universe. No thoughts, The separation has literally gone. All these experiences, I would say, started off when I was 17. But I can still say when I was younger, I would feel a sense of connection, a very powerful connection with the others, with people around me, my family, whom I was interacting with. A sense of separation, sense of being separate from the others, I would say was very thin, even growing up.
So you felt like, as you explained, no sense of self. So a collective consciousness. So we all are a part of one consciousness, and you didn't see yourself as just Preeta ji.
Yes, absolutely. It is like the I that you feel, the separate sense of self, that this is my body, this is not my body, this is me and this is not me. Those experiences in those powerful enlightened states, the sense of self had gone. And what was existing is just the breath, just the seeing, just the hearing. And, when you're in that state, no judgments, no thought noise, and inner quiet and inner still. These experiences began, I would say, these powerful experiences began when I was 17.
Is there something that you believed very strongly when you were younger about consciousness, about this path, that you no longer believe? Has something shifted? Or do you feel like what you knew from deep within, from a young time, is what has actually strengthened?
I would say that. I would say the second possibility is what happened. Like, I wouldn't say a drastic shift. Like, I woke up one day and this has gone and I was suffering, I was in deep problems, and, suddenly this happened. I don't have that story. World somehow wants to hear such stories.
Yeah.
And people have been always framing such stories, but I never had such a story. But what you said was like a deeper realization of what I always truly believed kind of surfaced, and that became the path.
So, according to me, most spiritual leaders speak about enlightenment. Most spiritual leaders talk about enlightenment as something to achieve. Do you feel like it already exists and is something to look within? Or do you feel it is a state we really have to work towards?
It is a state that one has to work towards. What is existing right now at this point is thought noise, inner chatter, chaos, and a lot of movement into the past and the future, an inability to be in the present moment, an inability to move into expanded states, an inability to experience true love, true joy. So enlighten, it is like a Buddha that has been covered in mud. There's a very ancient story of Buddha that's been covered in mud, and that mud has to be flushed in order to experience and see the true Buddha. There's a very ancient story from Thailand. It's pretty similar to that. You need to become free of your mind, your ego, your sense of self, which constantly creates duality, your sense of craving, which leads to obsession. Once you become free of all those, and what shines from within is enlightenment, what shines from within is that expanded state, where you are totally present, where you are in the moment, where you are alive to the person, to life, to everything around you.
You think it's truly possible for human beings to be free of desire?
We don't have a problem with desire, but what truly obscures enlightenment, or what truly obscures that state from shining, is obsessive craving and obsessive revolving around the object of desire. And also the belief that once one attains that object of desire, then one will become very happy and joyful. It is a wrong belief. You have an object of desire, you probably experience a little pleasure, that is it. It is not going to make you feel like
fulfilled. It doesn't.
It doesn't. So, but a lot of emphasis internally has been given to the object of desire, which makes one believe that once you achieve the object of desire, then all your problems are gone, your suffering is gone, and you'll feel elated.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
It's temporary happiness.
Temporary pleasure, temporary happiness is what you get. But then you move into the next object of desire. But desire itself is not a problem. the obsession that this gives, the ignorance gives, that is the problem.
Yeah, because I don't think as human beings we can truly ever be free of desire. Even to have an
You don't
enlightened-
need to be free of desire, but you definitely can become free of the suffering that desire causes.
I agree.
You can become free of the obsession that you're having with the desire.
Because even to want to be in an enlightened state is a desire. You know what I mean? Like everything is a desire. Like we all, I don't think we can be completely ever be free of desire. We will
Absolutely
want
not.
something. Even if it's enlightenment, I want to be in a Buddhist state, I want to be free of suffering, even that is a desire. So I don't think we can be free of desire, like you said. I agree. To be free of that obsession, yes, and also the suffering that comes with it, because we become so fixated on the result that if I get the result, only then I'll be happy. I don't think we focus on the experience of getting there.
Absolutely, that is not there.
Yeah.
You don't realize that every moment is a blessing. Every moment of life lived is a true blessing. And it actually makes you feel complete, whole, and fulfilled when you are able to experience every moment of the journey rather than just being fixated on the end result and obsessing over the end result.
So does meditation change the brain? Tell me, what is meditation to you? What is meditation in Ekam? And does it really rewire who we are?
So two parts to it. Meditation is an overused word. There are two ways at which we see meditation. Meditation as a very conscious practice and also meditation as a happening. It is not an effort. At Ekam, when one meditates, meditation is a happening. You're not fighting with your mind that is moving into past or future. You're not struggling with yourself to be in the present moment. You're not struggling with your inner noise, but there is a calm that settles within your entire being. And that is meditation as a happening, which happens at Ekam, which happens at different journeys that we lead people through, where we lead them beyond their mind to experience powerful states of consciousness. Meditation as a conscious effort, that also we teach people. And there are many kinds of meditation. You have movement meditation, concentration meditation. And it is like each meditation has a specific result to kind of build focus, to kind of being able to be present. You do the concentration based meditation, and it could be concentration at a point. It could be concentration on your chakras. It could be any concentration, or it could be movement based meditation, where you begin to focus on your breath, the movement of your breath. It could be walking meditation, the movement as you touch the grass, as you feel the earth. All these are different forms of meditation, and every form of meditation has a specific result, and definitely it changes the brain. In its simplest terms, see, when we talk about meditation, what it leads you into is a greater calm, a greater peace within oneself. When you are angry, when you are stressed, when you are in fear and anxiety and worry, there is a particular region in your brain that is active. In the meditations that we teach, it starts like the tiniest little meditation, which is a 3-minute meditation, and it's long. I mean, it gets longer and longer as you kind of learn one after the other. And as we lead people through these powerful meditations, the brain changes. So how does the brain change? The activity shifts from the limbic system or the amygdala. It shifts to the medial prefrontal cortex. It activates the region in your brain that is responsible for greater calm, quiet, awareness, and connection. So meditation does change not only your brain, it changes your entire ecosystem in your body. It changes the way your trillion cells in your body is communicating with each other. It changes the activation of different chakras. It changes the muscles. It changes the muscle memory. It changes the vibration around you. It changes one's life.
So at Ekam, I know you speak about a beautiful state of mind and a suffering state of mind. For somebody who doesn't know Ekam, for somebody who doesn't understand consciousness, can you in very basic words explain what those two states of mind are?
It's a very powerful teaching which Sri Krishna ji shares with the world, that every human being, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, male or a female, whichever religion you belong to, whatever your profession may be, you live only in two states. That is, your inner experience is only two. You are either, at this moment, you are either in stressful states or suffering states, or you are in beautiful states. And there is no third state. It could be intense, it could be less intense. But there are only two experiences that is happening to you internally. And what we are showing to the world is your life so much depends on the state. So you've always believed that your state is dependent on your life.
Correct.
Things are not happening the way you want it to happen and you're sad. Or somebody said something to you, you're hurt. Or you did not reach your goal, you're disappointed. You always believe that an external situation is creating an inner disturbance. What we want to show you is it is the other way too. Once you live in, say, anxiety or fear or disappointment or hurt, you wired your brain. So you have a wiring that has happened. And that means in this garden, say there is the gardeners want to take a shortcut to that part of the garden. Over a period, they use this path. It becomes a path, a natural path in the garden. The grass doesn't grow very well there. Pretty similarly, there is a pathway that you have created in your brain because, say, for external situations, you moved into anxiety or fear, and there is a pathway in your brain, neural connection in your brain where you're wired for fear or anxiety. Let's keep it anxiety because people understand anxiety now.
Correct.
And what happens over a period of time is this neural connection is very strong. You've not used awareness, you've not brought attention to yourself, your thinking, nothing you have done, and it continues to build. That means even the smallest change in the external environment is pushing you into this anxiety. Okay? And over a period of time, whenever there is this neural connection that fires, a particular neuropeptide gets released. What does that mean is, over a period of time, the neurons in your brain are addicted to those particular neuropeptides, which gets released when you move into anxiety. So, to life, what it means at that point is that there are many different situations that can happen in your life. You know, a wonderful hug from your child, or something beautiful happening at your work. But unfortunately, you are very blind to all of those. And your mind brings attention only to those specific incidents that will
Satisfy those
neurons with those neuropeptides, because the neurons are addicted.
Right.
So you are basically blind to everything else that is happening, and you believe, you begin to see, and it changes your perception of life also.
Yeah.
You begin to see only those experiences that will kind of, move you into anxiety, things not happening the way you want it to happen, the market's not doing well. But then you are only bringing attention to those because your neurons are addicted at one point and they want those neuropeptides. Till this, it is more the brain and the brain size, your perception and addiction of the neurons. But then we are just not the mind and the brain. We are much deeper.
Correct.
And in the realm of consciousness, each individual is sending out signals to the world. So if you are in states of anxiety, you are sending out signal to the universe. And the signal is unconsciously, unknowingly, the signal that you're sending is, get me more problems. Get me more situations that will keep me in anxiety. There's one powerful insight which Sri Krishna ji and I share with the world. The state in which you are living, the state from which you are responding, whether it is a beautiful state or a suffering state, that state would get reinforced. So if you are responding to life from anxiety and fear, if you are they're making decisions from anxiety and fear, whether to invest or not to invest, whether to be in that relationship or not to be in that relationship, whether to resign or keep your job. But when it is coming from that state, situations would so unfold in your life by which that state would get reinforced. So what does it mean? You will find more people, more situations that will keep you tied to anxiety. So your state and your life are not two compartments. You can't say what I'm feeling is just inside me. My thoughts are just what is happening inside me and it's not going to affect my life. It is not true. Your state and your life are intricately connected. And that is why you will pick one person out of 8.1 or 8. How billion population we have. We'll pick that one person who will make us feel the same way what you felt earlier. And how do we change that? You change your external. You change what is going to happen in your life, the people whom you meet, life situations, by changing your inner world. So it is just not constantly bringing attention to the external world that is going to make a difference to the external world. If you're going to remain the same stressful states or suffering states, life, I would say, would pretty much be the same. But if you want something very different to happen in your life, it is extremely important that you are able to live in a beautiful state. So we have meditations, we have practices, we have deep processes, because many times suffering and stressful states that become part of one's existence.
Correct.
You need something deeper. You can't give an advice, I'm not going to give an advice to you or anybody else saying that you have to live in a beautiful state. Come on, get up and walk. And that's it over. No, because the suffering, the stress has become so much part of living. And most of them are living in this fight or flight mode all the time. It's destroying your body, your relationships, it's destroying your brain, the chemistry, everything is destroying. So you need a greater support, you need a greater practice, a path. That is our path. Meditations, wisdom, where you have very powerful insights, very powerful realizations. Not only that, you are led into powerful experiences in consciousness, which will get you beyond the suffering, the separating mind, powerful experiences that will allow you to change the state internally, and you will land in this place of being calm, quiet, feeling gratitude, experiencing love, experiencing connection. All that becomes possible.
Yeah, because I think what you're saying is very true. We don't even realize that we're living in that state. It's almost as if it's natural. Like you see certain people and you see that their stress state of mind is just how they are. So everything is stressed. Yes. They're stressed about their food, they're stressed about their work, they're stressed about their relationships. And I actually see this where that is what is thrown at them because that is all they see.
Yes.
It's almost like
that is all is thrown at them and that is all is seen and that is what they want. I mean, not consciously.
I know.
That is what they are inviting.
Yeah, because it's like satisfying that inner need, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're right. It's like, you know how they say, what you're seeking is seeking you. It's that. If you're seeking that, then that's what is coming towards you. You're absolutely right. That's beautiful. I would love to, deep dive a little bit more into how you said to separate the suffering and to see really the beauty that life has to offer. Because like you said, we are constantly living in that state, not even realizing. Tell me, one is you and Krishnaji are spiritual partners. One is you have built this beautiful space, that I'm extremely lucky to experience. So don't you experience conflict? Don't you experience the normal way of life that we experience, where we experience stress, conflict, disagreements? Do you have that as well? Shri Krishnaji and you.
Absolutely, yes. We have disagreements, we have our viewpoints, we have our perceptions. But that doesn't go beyond that. So it is like, if you ask if it's the same as what happens in a normal couple's relationship, definitely yes, but also no, because what is left behind as disappointment, hurt, regret, all that is absent over here. So disagreements in terms of external, the perceptions, conflict in terms of what we have to do at this point, all that would exist. but nothing in terms of the inner state, the continuation that happens in a normal couple's relationship of hurt and disappointment and sadness and anger and wanting to teach the other a lesson, wanting to show that you are right, all that inner suffering is absent. I want to make it very clear, a distinction. People always confuse suffering and problems. Problems are what is happening in the external world. You can't have a total control of what is happening in the
Correct.
external world.
Life is going to happen to you.
Yeah, it is going to happen. But those are problems, challenges, obstacles. But do you need to move into suffering in order to address those problems? Definitely not. So in our relationships, there are problems externally in terms of decisions because we work together.
Correct.
We're leading a movement together.
Exactly.
So we have our perceptions, we have our ideas, but not that we move into conflict within oneself. That doesn't happen for both Sri Krishna ji and me.
So tell me, as my listeners are young professionals, young couples who want to understand why is there suffering in relationships? Like you said, obstacles are to come, problems are to come, disagreements and conflicts are going to happen. How is it that we can move into a state of a relationship with problems, a relationship with obstacles, but without suffering?
Absolutely. See, it's a very tricky question because we actually relate to a lot of couples all over the world. And the one thing that I always say is you need to have a beautiful heart in order to nurture a relationship. You need to have a heart that has been nurtured, that has been supported, that has experienced connection, that can go beyond oneself. If you do not have that heart, relationships can be very difficult. If you do not have a heart that has experienced love and connection at some point with your parents growing up or your grandparents or a support from a teacher or something, and if you are so dry in your experiences earlier, it is more relationship, love, connection is such an alien experience or an alien language to you, and you really don't know. You can have the most wonderful person in your life, but you do not know how to nurture that relationship. You do not know how to experience togetherness. And what we have observed is people who have had difficulty earlier on in their lives for reasons unknown or known, and they have lived a lot of time feeling separate or just keep it in suffering.
Yeah.
Feeling abandoned, feeling not loved, not cared, not supported enough. And that is the experience that one has been fueling growing up. We have seen those people are incapable of nurturing love and connection. I would not say that is the be all and end all of it. You need to work on yourself. You need to have those powerful experiences and consciousness. You need to nourish your being so that you can nourish a relationship. So relationship means togetherness. So it's not living under the same roof.
Yeah,
that is not a relationship.
Correct.
We're talking about actually experiencing togetherness, joy together, feeling joyful for others' joy, celebrating and appreciating the other being. These are all experiences of relationship. And it actually happens when you can experience togetherness. But unfortunately, earlier in your life, if you have lived in suffering and stress and all that, you have lived feeling separate. So all that you know is oneself, your problems, your challenges, your sadness, how the world has treated you bad, how God has not helped you, how your people have not supported you. So that is what you have been living in. And most people live there, especially when they're facing challenges and obstacles. And they have lost the ability to expand, to include. And that is why in a relationship, they're still getting stuck to, being in blame, wanting to prove one's worth, wanting to prove right. So it's still about themselves. They don't know to go beyond themselves. And when you do not know to go beyond yourself, then relationships are difficult. So a very powerful spiritual experience, a powerful journey is very important. Nurturing one's heart is extremely important to nurture beautiful relationships in life.
That's very similar to what psychology also says, that if your childhood was traumatic, if you did not experience love, if you did not experience abundance, then it's very hard to give that in adult life, right? If I was not treated right in my childhood, if I was abandoned, if I was, I don't know, had rough parents or abusive parents, emotionally abusive, not physically, then you don't see a good example, then you don't know how to live a good example, correct? Is that what we're speaking about?
It is more not about seeing a good example and not living a good example. I would say it's more to do with much deeper than that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if you didn't experience any of those things in your childhood, how do you even know? It's like if you didn't teach a child English, if you only taught them Hindi, they wouldn't grow up and suddenly start speaking English. It's the language they were taught. So my point is that even in psychology, they say, you know, the language that you are taught as a child is the language you speak when you grow up.
Yes.
And this is what I'm trying to ask, that is this similar to what you're saying?
At a one level, yes, but then it goes much deeper in terms of your thinking. Where has the center of your thinking been revolving over several years and decades? And your heart's ability to flower and include the others in your experience. Is that possible or not? If it's possible, relationships would be great. If that's not possible, and you have, say, had a sudden breakup with somebody and then it has kind of hurt you very deeply, then also I see this happening. When people are very terrified of trusting somebody else, there is so much of mistrust that has crept into them. And they are not capable of trusting somebody. I mean, relationship needs trust, but then you're not capable of trust. Relationship needs experiencing togetherness, but you're not capable of that. Then relationship suffers. And now coming to psychology part, as I said, like a lot of spirituality has been eaten up by Western psychology now. And I mean, I visit US many times, and I have seen like so many therapists who have come to oneness, spent a large amount of time, weeks learning, and then going it and taking it. As you said, each form, like therapy, any form can get attached to something. So they've taken a lot of teaching, and they have gone to kind of make it part of their practice. And that's why spirituality comes in such a need at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
Because what do? You do not have control over what has happened to you in your past.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, your past is
driving your present.
Yeah, driving your present.
Correct.
Your strings are attached there.
Yeah.
And you're working very hard here to kind of have a different experience. And you're using all positive thinking or self-help or working very hard to cut those ties, consciously or unconsciously. But what truly works is a very powerful spiritual journey.
I agree, because, it's very easy to say that, oh, this person had a difficult childhood, for example. And if they stop thinking about their childhood and they start thinking about, having a better adulthood or a better life ahead and actually getting married and being happy, they can do it. It's easy in concept. But like you said, if your inner being is only used to that suffering or is only used to that pain, like you said before, will probably seek that pain again. So even in the adult life, they'll probably seek that pain again from a partner, from their children, from whatever's to come in their life. They wouldn't be open to love.
Yes, it's not possible.
Yeah.
So it is like, then what we do is we through the practices, it is like they are held. And then through the practices, through the processes, they are creating the new pathways that they need to experience. So it's not going to happen overnight. But one has to be on the path, one has to work on oneself to actually free themselves of ties. And advice is not going to work. Advice is not going to work. Positive affirmations also don't work. So it's, the world is used to fast foods, quick fixes. But unfortunately, they don't have a deeper standing in our being.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a complete believer in only speaking positive affirmations. It's like reciting in the morning and you're done. But if you don't really believe in it, if
you don't feel it.
You don't feel it. Yeah, I agree.
I
I feel like then you're just saying things. It's like saying I'm a very honest person and then you're lying through the day. What is the point of saying again and again I'm an honest person? It's almost like that. I completely agree. I have a problem with only this affirmation kind of thought process because I'm like, that is just talking.
Yeah.
What about actually doing? I can say a lot of things. They say talk the talk and walk the walk. You actually have to walk the walk. Just talking is not enough. So I am with you 100% on that. Tell me, many spiritual movements have begun with beautiful intention, drifted into hierarchy, control, and financial exploitation. I want to understand what are the guardrails at Ekam that you follow that won't fall into those categories.
See, the focus, the vision that we have, we don't move out of that focus and that vision. Our vision is enlightenment of people. And we believe that when we have a particular number of people actually lived in the space of enlightenment in this state, the world would be a different place. And to help individuals get out of their stress and their suffering, to help them live in beautiful states, to make them live their life from peace in their being, to experience greater connection with people in their lives, and to experience oneness in their consciousness is our vision. And we have not moved away from this vision even a tiny bit for all the work that we have done in this world.
Do you feel people who achieve a certain amount of enlightenment or experience this bliss, do you feel they're truly able to let go of their ego?
Absolutely, yes. Even if they do get hurt, even if the ego does surface, but they know that there is a greater experience possible. They know it's not my words, right? It's not my words, it's not my advice. Oh, somebody told me, Preetaji told me that I should live free of ego. No. They know for themselves that there is a different, beautiful experience of life that is possible free of that ego. So that kind of brings back that vision to bring awareness to it and to dissolve it, to get back to life. So challenges would come, obstacles would come. These people I'm talking about who are going through these journeys also might move into sadness, suffering, a little bit of fear, but they would not live in that space for long. That I can be very, very sure. They know that this is not the state in which I should live their life. So they do the practices, they dissolve that suffering, they dissolve that stress, get back to a place of calm, quiet. And these people are spread all over the world. They are literally in many parts of the world, and they are shining light to so many people around them, either in their family, in their organizations, whomever they touch, they are creating a beautiful world, a beautiful community around themselves.
Can you explain what ego really is? Because I think in the modern world, we have used this term in so many formats and so many ways that I don't think people truly understand, because I is ego, yes, but I think ego has a truly different meaning to just saying I is ego.
A desperate effect or a desperate need to keep this I intact, to be seen, to be heard, to be more, that is the activity of the ego. It is like you're not living life. You have a child. So you're not, I'm not talking about you, but anybody.
Yeah.
So you have a child and those are precious moments when you're being with your child, and those precious moments actually sculpting your child. That's a different story. But instead of experiencing that, your mind is focused on being bigger, being seen, being right, being heard. That entire activity of the mind, which is trying to keep this I puffed up, that is ego.
The importance of I.
The importance of I. And what it does is not allowing you to be present to your child, not allowing you to actually cultivate love, connection. Because those moments that you can be totally present to your child is sculpting your child's inner experience. Unfortunately, you are caught up in something that is totally a waste of time. And it is like your energy is being divided. and you're having your energies focused in the wrong place, it's really not going to be useful.
You know, a lot of people say that spirituality, movements like oneness or Ekam are for the privileged. Because a lot of people feel like if I don't have the basic means, if I'm living in poverty, if I'm not living in the basic state of money that, you need to survive, how can I go into something like this?
No, actually, if you see the villages around, I don't know if you have the time, but we work on the villages around, and there are people we support them, but they have very little means. But they have taken in the essence, the philosophy, the teachings. These people sit down and they start the day with meditation, doing the soul sync meditation for a beautiful state in their consciousness. I wouldn't say it is, as I said, there is a lot of confusion between taking, the external problems into the inner world. But if you can clearly demarcate that problems are there, problems would come. What you need to do those problems is right action to dissolve those problems, and consistent right actions is what is going to create a destiny. But internally, you're capable of doing that when you become free of suffering and nurture a beautiful state. You can start anywhere. All that one needs is a beautiful vision. I know that you all have vision for the external world, what you should achieve, where you should live, what should be your means of transport, where should be your home, everything you have. But you need to have a vision for your inner state, which we call as a spiritual vision. A spiritual vision to live in a beautiful state of consciousness. And that is what is needed. It doesn't matter whether you have the means or whether you're struggling in life, you're trying to make your life. I would say you become very intelligent, very smart, with great energies if you are able to nurture a beautiful state. And you will have, this is one of the most important things to create all the external abundance that one wants to create.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the connection between the internal and external is hazy. I think that's where the clarity is lacking, because we do make everything happening to us.
Yes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very hard, and it takes a lot to separate that this is happening to me. Do I really need to, be in the state of mind all the time to think about, can I solve this, can I not? Because we become, it's almost like we're trained to do that, right?
Yes, yeah. And that training has to break.
Yeah. And you actually do need external force to do it, because it's very hard to do it yourself. For example, I got late coming here, and then, I don't know, the camera fell, and then something happens, and it can completely change your state of mind, and you can be like, nothing is working out for me, and the shoot is not going to plan. And then we also start to think like, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Nothing on this has happened, but I'm just giving an example. Yes. And one is like, okay, all this is happening, but it's about the conversation, and I'm here, and I'm so privileged to be here. I'm so lucky to be here, and I'm so grateful. I have gratitude to be here and just experience it. But I think it takes a lot to get there.
Absolutely. And it takes a lot. That's why oneness is a path.
Yeah.
Though the people begin to experience relief in the first day or the first few hours, but it is a path. We want it to become the way one is living life. So we don't want it to be a feel-good experience. We don't want it to just kind of give you a little relief or break from your inner stress. We want you to live in a beautiful state day in and day out, if possible, 24 hours. The vision should be that. Even if you're able to shift that inner experience, say, by 30% or 40%, you will see a huge result in the external world.
You're absolutely right, because I think a lot of people also come seeking for a short experience.
Yeah.
Everybody treats spirituality as a retreat. Go for a few days, feel out of your comfort zone.
Get back to old ways of living, get back to old ways of feeling. No.
Yeah.
That has to change.
Yeah, I think everyone does treat, I see largely, I won't say everyone, but largely people do treat it as a momentary retreat to go and get relief and then come back to their way of being. And then nothing really changes, nothing really shifts. It's like a holiday.
Yes.
You go on vacation.
It's like a movie. You watch the movie for 3 hours and you probably involved in the movie, but then get out of the movie is gone. That's why I always say we are not interested in creating a small shift and where you get back to old ways. No, we want it. That's why the vision becomes very important. The path becomes important. The practices become very important.
Can you tell our listeners the top 5 teachings of oneness that I won't be able to learn from anywhere else in the simplest way possible?
I wouldn't give 5. I would still give that same one that I gave you. It is to nurture beautiful states, to change your inner chemistry, to change your neural connections, to change your experience of life, and to also change your life itself. What's the state you are living your life from? Are you living your life from stressful states or beautiful states? And I would say whenever you experience stress, whatever it could be, that form of stress, it could be anger, it could be fear, it could be sadness, it could be disappointment, whatever that stress is, whenever a stressful state arises, if you are able to bring conscious attention to those stressful states and slowly nurture beautiful states in your consciousness, and I can guarantee you that your life would be very, very, very different. And for that, we have created this very simple 3-minute practice. It is like brain training to starting. When your external is not fine and you're moving into stressful states, this would be the go-to practice, which is called the serene mind practice, which pushes you into a place of awareness. For us, awareness is just not observation. For us, awareness is observing in the light of an insight. And serene mind uses the insight, this particular insight. What is the state? Is it suffering state or is it a beautiful state? And then observing the mind as it moves into suffering or in a beautiful state. That is, are you moving into a past and a future or are you in the present? And then this practice is also mystical because it activates a different region in your brain. So it is a practice that anybody can do. So you don't need to be initiated or anything. Anybody can pick it up. Every time you're in stress, you can do this practice. And over a period of time, it is important that you are able to step out of your stressful states and nurture beautiful states. When you have the external creating this is a go-to practice. But say you're somebody who's wired to being stressful for a very long time, you need deeper processes. And there are processes that we offer, allowing you to kind of declutch and disentangle from your past, allowing you to experience very beautiful things. Some beautiful states. Sometimes the past could not only be your past, it is also the past of your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. Their states are continuing to flow within you. So it's just not genetics. It is just not, genetics gets transferred. Your body is because of what they ate, what they, how they lived, how they walked or did not walk. Your body is their experience, whether they starved or did not starve.
They call it generational trauma. It's just passed on.
It's genetic material that's getting passed on. It is just not what is being passed on in the body, but it is also the state that is getting passed on. Science is coming close to it, calling it epigenetics now. But we in India have been speaking about it for ages. We talk about the generational karma getting transferred. Karma can be external. It could also mean that there's state of consciousness getting passed on again and into the family. That is why you always see that there are repeating patterns in the family.
Yeah.
Patterns of loss, patterns of failure, patterns of separation. Earlier times, they never used to separate. Now they separate, but they lived under the same roof, but they were separated.
Correct.
So all that gets passed on for those freedom from that past. We don't want you to be controlled by your past. Whether it is the recent past, whether it is your childhood past, whether it's your grandparents' past or your great-grandparents' past. To get past that, the journey kind of liberates you, frees you, actually changes the entire karmic wiring, the karmic energy. It shifts, it changes. And that's why the journey is extremely important.
Why do you think we are here? Do you think we are here to solve a purpose? Do you think we are here to only experience life and to understand the conscious, subconscious and the one consciousness? Or do you think we are here to suffer?
We're here to live life. We are here to experience life. And when you actually live life, when you are totally present, when you're alive, it could be alive to present to your child, alive to nature, to the mountains. If you're alive, if you're actually living life, you don't ask this question. You ask this question because somehow you are not alive. And purpose itself can be two levels. One is to just be alive. The second level is to kind of impact positively and creating a difference. People start over here with experiences of greater connection by which they discover a particular purpose for their life. And that would be to impact, create a larger good for somebody else. Could be their family, could be their children, could be their community. So, but somewhere, that is one kind of purpose. But then the ultimate purpose is to live life.
Because, like we were talking earlier, I think the previous generations were in this world to survive. They spend their time hunting, gathering, making sure to have a family, making sure they can feed their family.
But they also lived life at that point.
I agree. But as life is moving forward and as the current generation or the future ones are experiencing life at a much easier pace than what probably our grandparents did. They saw wars, they saw famine, they saw poverty, they saw a lot of things that probably today's generation is not seeing. We're born in a hospital that is equipped with everything. 2 generations ago, they didn't have that. So I think today's youth is asking, what is our purpose? And I think a lot of, I would say, communities, religions sell purpose as a thing to achieve. Do you think it is something to achieve?
The life earlier, they had to kind of, live in dangerous situations. They had to fight or escape a tiger or a lion or something. They had to be on this run. But the life today is not very different. You don't need to fight a tiger. You don't need to fight a lion. You don't need to escape in the wild. But unfortunately, you feel that you are facing a lion every day of your life. It could be your partner, it could be your boss, it could be a relative, but you're constantly threatened. So the experience externally has changed so much.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it has really not caused a great difference in how one is experiencing. There is a lion, there is a tiger, you're escaping all the time, you have to face the boss, you have to face a situation. There is that same experience that is continuing internally. External life has definitely become comfortable. But it's the youth, as I hear you very clearly, the youth is asking questions that what earlier generations would ask at 50 or 60.
Correct.
They are asking the questions earlier. And even in my travels all over the world, so 20 years ago or 25 years ago when we were out there, people who filled the hall were seekers who had this quest of wanting to find out about God, about the higher purpose, about what is the purpose of life. So they were the people who actually filled the hall. Today it is not like that. Today spirituality has kind of gone into mainstream. It is not for the small section of the society, but it has been taken in to be applied for life.
Correct.
And youth today are asking this question. And the answer again would not be very different from what I said earlier. It is to discover a purpose. Imagine each of this youth being connected either to their friends or to their families or to the environment. And from that space of connection, when you're connected, there is a deep desire to improve something,
Correct.
A deep desire to make a difference, a deep desire to impact. That desire to create an impact because of that experience of connection, not to prove oneself, not to see oneself as being big, not to being bigger and powerful than the rest. That is not the reason. When you are actually wanting to see and create an impact on life from that space of connection, that would become your purpose. Not something that the society is putting into you or what the community
Correct.
is saying or what the family is putting. No. Not that pressure, not to make yourself feel that you are great, you're on top of the world, you have achieved so much more.
Yeah.
And always it comes in comparison.
Yeah.
But in that space of connection, if you discover something, then that's incredibly beautiful. And I would recommend youth to take that path because if you just do something for the sake of somebody else, if it's just for the ego, if it's just to make yourself kind of being puffed up, and, you know,
Momentarily.
inflated balloon.
Yeah.
Like how long can you keep this balloon inflated?
Not long.
And then it'll shrink, and then you will ask this question, oh, what am I doing with my life? You get burnt out then. But if it's coming from the place of connection, a deeper purpose, because, you know, you can create, you have this ability to create, and you can create a difference. And from that space, you're creating a difference. Then there's something very beautiful that unfolds in life. You feel very supported. And you should actually discover purpose that way, rather than trying to take in from what's getting passed on from families, or what's getting passed on
from
to
generations,
communities, or what is the cool thing, what is not the cool thing. I mean, those kind of will keep you deflated, keep you asking this question, what am I doing with my life? Or feeling purposeless, meaningless, burnt out. All that happens when you do not experience connection and fulfillment.
Why do people feel burnout today at a very young age? Don't you think like this word is also slightly overused and slightly wrongly used? Because burnout means you really feel you've exhausted everything in your life.
Because one is searching for fulfillment in what one is doing. What you're actually longing. So in a relationship, what you're actually longing is togetherness. Unfortunately, you're fighting. You're fighting with your own ideas of right, wrong, justice, injustice, blame, all that you're holding on to. You're not experiencing the togetherness. Over here in life, say something that you're doing with life, what you want to experience is fulfillment.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you're stuck with all these preconceived ideas of what is making me great, what is making me cool, what is making me be above everybody else, what is keeping you, like it's a constant state of comparison, and it's very painful.
Exhausting.
Yeah, it is exhausting. And then you ask this question, oh my God, I thought I will be happy at the end of achievement, and I'll be happy when I reach this post, I'll be happy when I buy my house, I'll be happy when I'm able to travel so much. But then that happiness never comes.
Yeah.
And you're able to get all this much faster. Like, you know, if earlier times when they had to buy a home, it used to take a couple of decades before you buy a home.
Entire life sometimes.
Yeah, so entire lives. You live to get married.
Correct.
Or children married, or you like, that is like right now, people told me that I'll be married and then experience great togetherness, joy, love, connection, but that's nothing. I'm not feeling any of those things. So it is like that constant search for something which is tiring you, because of which you're getting burnt out. And that achievement is happening. Fulfillment is not happening. But what you're truly searching for is fulfillment. But you believe that by achieving, you'll experience fulfillment. But this is not happening. That is happening. So you're confused. And then you're refusing to run because you're tired.
Yeah.
You know that at least you have a sense that you're running the wrong way, or you're running westwards to see the sunrise. So you get a feel of that. So then that's the burnout. Okay, I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not feeling what I have to feel. I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling nice. I'm not feeling fulfilled. There's something wrong.
So please tell me, if someone right now is genuinely living in a dark moment and they're desperate for peace or an answer, they're curious, but they're desperate, and they don't necessarily are spiritually aligned, what is the one thing you would tell them?
I would still tell them to hold on to a practice. And when you say spiritually not aligned, what do you mean?
You know, there are a lot of people who say I'm not religious, I'm not spiritual.
Okay. Spirituality is the answer for your dark moment. And you don't need to live this way. When people are in dark moments, the experience is that, this is how life is going to be. And when they are it is like the deep darkness, they don't see light at all. And they don't believe that there is light.
Correct.
But if you can hold on to any practice, even the simplest soul sync practice that is available all over, and do it very diligently, whether you align with spirituality or not, think about it as a brain training or your mind training. Do it consistently every day for 12 minutes. Then you would get out of this dark moment and you would see light.
And what do most spiritual seekers get wrong about the search itself?
To believe that there is one final state from which they don't drop down, and to believe that that's going to be, there is the search for that one final state where there is not really a drop from. I think that is a wrong search. It is a path, it is a journey. It is where you're constantly growing. It is about dissolving and letting go of the past, letting go of the stress and suffering, and evolving. There is no a final destination.
Yeah, people do think they'll reach the Mount Everest and that
then-
is it.
Yeah. So there's nothing called maintaining or reaching there and being there. It is a path. It is growth. And if you're starting your experience from, being 100 or 70% of your time in stressful and suffering states, the question is, can you shift it? Can you live your life 70% experiencing peace, calm, and joy and connection, and probably 30%, even if the 30% can get lesser and lesser and lesser, that's great.
So Preetaji, I don't know if I can, but I would like to ask, are you still seeking? Are you still searching?
I wouldn't say I am longing. I wouldn't say I am seeking or even searching, but definitely I would say that I am continuing to grow. Beautiful.
Preetaji, before we end, could you tell me what is the fine line between inner peace and moral responsibility?
See, when you are internally very peaceful, you will be responsible. I wouldn't term it moral responsibility. You will be very, very responsible. That's a responsibility not as an ideal, not that has been passed on to you because of the society or because of your religion or because of your family. But when you are internally peaceful, you feel so connected.
You see it as a human responsibility.
Yeah, you feel as though you are doing it to yourself. And you will do exactly what you would do to yourself. You would be responsible, you would be kind, you would be joyful, you would be loving. And from that space, something very beautiful emerges. And we totally distinguish between what is coming out through values, ideals, what is getting passed on, and what is emerging from the state of connection. And when you are peaceful, you would not do something that is going to hurt somebody else. It is the fruit of being peaceful. It is not, you have to do that. You have to be morally responsible. It doesn't come from like a higher power or authority saying that you have to live your life like this or you have to act this way. But it is the natural outcome of peace. That kindness would be a natural outcome of peace. That action would be a natural outcome of peace.
Any last few words for our listeners?
I would definitely say this world would be a very beautiful place. Whether you consider your family as your world or the place where you work as your world or as a community, the world would definitely be a very beautiful place if you have many people live in a beautiful state of consciousness. The world that we see today is a result of large swaths of people living in stress, confusion, conflict, and suffering. If that changes, the world can be extremely beautiful. And it has to start from the individual. So you can't wait for somebody else to be in a beautiful state. As one is listening to this, I would expect them to actually hold a spiritual vision to live in a beautiful state. And then they are part of the world movement to create a beautiful world.
Thank you so much, Preetaji. It has been such a beautiful experience. And I hope people are able to experience the bliss that I did while sitting with you.
Beautiful. I mean, it's so nice to be having this conversation with you, Ashna. And they were very different questions. I'm sure you're taking something very nice to your audience. And it's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste.